Thanks for joining this conversation, Kevin. Thanks for being with me. Thanks for taking this time. You already mentioned that this is the first conversation for your day today. So, how are you feeling? How are you now?
First of all, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. I'm feeling very good. I'm very energized. I had a really good workout this morning. I had some deep focus time. So now I am facing the world and on camera for the rest of the day. So it's always a wonderful start to the day. And I think you and I are going to get along wonderfully.
I do agree on this, and kudos for the studio behind you. I like it. I
Thank
love
you.
every time I speak with somebody where you see the personality behind in their background. Now, obviously, my personality is not that blank, but this is something that I work on. One of the reasons there were many of reasons I invited you to this conversation to dive deeper into your story. Now, what stood out to me was the immense amount of episodes that you already have. I managed to jump into a couple of episodes to briefly, get familiar with your content and what do you do. But I love the fact that you have so much experience into podcasting, and it's, as you already mentioned, it's something that you started even before it became cool in 2020. So kudos to this, my admiration to this. And not only this, it's a top performing podcast, and you have already managed to turn it into uh, a growing business, multi six figure business. So admiration for this. I'm sure that our listeners, me including, will have a lot to learn from your story.
Thank you.
So, Kevin, let's start from there. Actually, let's see how exactly your hero's journey started. Where was the first stages that you got triggered into your path?
Yeah, it's challenging, right? Because I think the initial stage was when I was very, very young. I was raised without a dad. I didn't know who my father was. So I was raised by my mom and my grandmother. And obviously, as a young boy, when you're looking around for a positive male role model and there isn't one there, that becomes a part of your story, whether you want it to or not. So that was a really big part of my story. And other than that, my childhood was normal, whatever you want to consider normal as. But the pivot in my life really started when I was in high school because I knew I didn't want to go to college.
Mhm.
I never felt smart. I never felt smart enough, and I could not imagine going to school for another 4 years. So I got a bunch of weird jobs. I pumped gas at a gas station. I cleaned floors and bathrooms and toilets at a hospital. I was a truck driver, a forklift operator, many, 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 many things. But eventually I got this very unique job in my early 20s. And this is really where it started for me. This is where my life started to really transition. I got a job in an industry called weatherization. So we would go into buildings, usually schools, fire stations, stuff like that. And it was our job to make the building more energy efficient. That was pretty much my job in a nutshell. So I went from making $15 an hour as a personal trainer to $60 an hour doing this new job. So my income 4x'd overnight. And I assumed that that was going to bring me happiness. I assumed that was going to fix the insecurities I had. I assumed it was going to make me more confident. And I realized pretty quickly after achieving the highest income I ever had that really didn't solve the problem. And I think that's where a lot of this started for me.
Great, great that you mentioned that not necessarily the monetary value equals fulfillment equals success at this stage, which is very confusing, either social media or our peers around us, especially in this age where when we are teenagers and we need to realize, okay, where exactly am I heading, like how can I be successful? Because
Yeah.
these were my thoughts as well when I was 14, 16. How can I become successful? And this was most of the time equal to, okay, more money, let's generate more income. What were your thoughts at this point? Like, how exactly did you go from one job to another? And what are you thinking? What are you looking for your calling?
No, I didn't think I had a calling. I didn't really feel like I ever had a purpose or or really passion. I wasn't really passionate about that much. I had a very unique cycle of I would work at a job until it got to the point where I didn't want to do it anymore. And then usually I would just quit without having another job. And then I would just go try to find another job that looked more interesting. And it really was that. I mean, I pretty much quit every job I ever had without having a backup. So for me, I believe I fell into my purpose. I fell into my passion. I fell into my mission. I never planned on doing most of the things that we're doing today. I'm extremely grateful that I'm privileged enough to have the opportunity to do it. But no, it was just, yeah, the gas station kind of sucks. Let me go find something else. Well, I've always wanted to be a personal trainer. I love fitness. All right, let me do that. Oh, this isn't really personal training. This is all about sales. Okay, I quit. Let me go find something else. Forklift operator. That seems like pretty cool. I think I might enjoy doing that. Oh, they want me to work overtime every single week. Oh, the fire department. Interesting. Being a firefighter would be really cool. So it was really that. The second I got sick of something, I tended to just look at what was the next shiny opportunity.
So a couple of things that stand out to me. I love the fact that you mentioned working out and fitness. It is a common topic in a couple of episodes that I already recorded and in my life story as well. That's why I'm bringing it up. Every hero walks through some kind of challenges to transform into a hero, right? You are not born a hero. So going, taking up some kind of sport, fitness, soccer, football, whatever you want to choose, it pushes you physically, but also it pushes you mentally as well, right? What were the lessons that you took from this, and why is it still in your daily routine? You already mentioned you managed to do a quick workout. Why is it still in your routine?
The biggest lesson is what you see in the mirror, and not just physically, but what you see, you can shape. The future you is going to be different than the current you, and it just depends on, is it going to be by accident or by intention? And that's the biggest lesson. When you start to see changes in your body, and then 5 years later, you're starting to see changes in your mindset, and then you start to see changes in your relationship, and then you start to see changes in your ability to speak and communicate, and then you start to see changes in the way you understand numbers. And it's the best representation of change in real time because it's physical and visual. That's why I love fitness so much. I love weightlifting. I love bodybuilding because you can see changes kind of in real time. That's part one. And part two, it might be the most humbling thing on the planet. The numbers on the side of the dumbbells don't lie. They don't care if you feel good. They don't care if you feel bad. It's not their job to make your life easier. It's their job to make your life challenging. And it keeps me very, very humble. I'm very humbled when I go in and I say, today's going to be a good one. Today wasn't really that good of a workout. It was okay, but I was humbled when I left. I said, I'm just tired and I'm beat and this diet's really crushing me. So the lessons are progress is possible for sure. Even when you don't see it, we are either getting better or worse. Nothing really does stay the same. It doesn't really work that way. And we are far more malleable, moldable than I think we realize.
Kevin, I love this because this is a message that I want to communicate to everybody that listens, that we come across. Like, we are able to change, we're able to adapt. We often think that, okay, this is an obstacle, this is an opportunity that I'm not qualified enough for, so I'm not going to try my best for this. But as you mentioned, working out or just simply taking up to study a new language, it shows us that with daily efforts and being more focused and more consistent, you can actually turn out to be whatever you want to be. Yes, you might need some talent in the beginning. You might not become as good as Picasso if you're not talented enough, but you can get to the top places if you're consistent enough.
Yeah.
So thanks for bringing this up and explaining this to listeners. I love this fact.
Of course.
Now, transitioning more a little bit towards the challenges and trying. You already mentioned that you realized that in your 20s having this job, even though it paid 4 times more, it wasn't necessarily fulfilling. what was happening in your brain at this point? Like, how was your mindset transforming to realize that money is not enough?
I'll never forget when I opened my final pay stub of the year in 2016, my goal was to make $100,000. And I did. I made $100,000 at 26 with no college degree. And I had that moment of, oh my goodness, I expected to feel completely different than I feel right now. I'm not any more confident. I'm not any more secure. I don't feel really any better about myself. Now, my bank account looked better, and that there's obviously that's important and that's circumstantial, and abundance is key. Having abundance is definitely important. But I didn't have abundance internally. So my mindset at that time was, oh my goodness, the thing that matters most is what you think about yourself and what you think about yourself before you go to bed. The external stuff is important for lifestyle, but it's not necessarily as important for your self-esteem and your confidence and your self-trust and your self-worth and all that stuff as I ever realized. So then I started to try to go more internal. Well, what can I do to learn about my own self-awareness? What can I learn about my traumas and my triggers and my past and my insecurities? So from 26 to 29 was really me learning about myself, why I thought the way I thought, why I didn't think the way I didn't think. I went on a very internal journey trying to figure out who the heck I was.
Most people go through those journeys. Something external triggers them, or something in their head is born, but not everybody goes through those kind of transformations, or not at the extent that they quit their current job and they actually pursue a certain passion.
Yeah.
Was there like a warning sign for you that made you realize this, besides, you realizing that you're not fulfilled enough at the end of the day? Like, was there somebody from your surrounding, or was it completely internally?
Most of it was internal, and it really came to a head. I mean, there was a warning for sure. It just took me a while to understand the warning was there. So the year after I made that money and the year after I started the podcast, so I started a podcast in 2017 all about becoming self-aware. That was my thing. I want to become as self-aware as I can. I fell in love with podcasting. So this is the first time I ever saw, wait, is this like a passion? Is this a purpose? Is this a calling? Is this a mission? What does this all mean? Why do I love this so much? As I was falling out of love with my job, I fell in love with podcasting. I don't want to do this job anymore because I know I don't want to do what it takes to get back to the top. I've already achieved what I wanted to achieve, and that was not the result I was actually looking for. So what happened was it got harder and harder and harder for me to go to work. I spent months and months on the road. A lot of our contracts were out of our state. And I was homesick and I was depressed and I was anxious, and it just got worse and worse and worse. And it all got to the point where I was sitting in a hotel room and I was contemplating suicide because I was so miserable and I felt so stuck and I felt so trapped, and so much of my identity and so much of my reputation was built up in this job, and my friends knew I made a bunch of money and my family knew I made a bunch of money, and I was just so afraid to start over. So I had that thought to myself, well, if I just take my life, I'll take all these problems with me. I won't have to start over. And that's when the mentor really started to be important, because I had a good friend who is now my business partner who I reached out to. And I said, hey, Alan, I'm struggling, man. I'm having these thoughts. I'm 6 hours away in this hotel room. I don't know what's going on. And he said many things when I sent him this message, but the thing I remember most was, Kev, over the last few years, your awareness has changed a ton, but your environments have remained the same. I think it's time for you to change your environment. So I'm very blessed that I had kind of a built-in mentor who had already experienced a lot of the things that I had experienced, and he was ahead of me in his clarity for what he wanted in life, and he helped me find more clarity of what I wanted.
Two main things I love that you mentioned: the fact how important awareness is, self-awareness is, and the pivotal role of having a mentor and a close friend to you. Before we move on to the mentor and telling me a little bit more about it, I just want to ask, at this point, what are you self-aware about? Meaning, like, you mentioned that the monetary success wasn't the right thing for you. Is there a current end goal, or is there a current mindset that you follow to remove any negative thoughts that come back to your head?
Yeah, at that time, I was very much in I am afraid of everything.
Mm.
And I need to get outside of my comfort zone to overcome a lot of these things that I'm afraid of because I realize they're holding me back. That season of my life was I just left my job. I have no income. I am getting broke pretty quickly because I'm burning through my savings. And right now we are going to live very, very, very outside of our comfort zone. And we're going to learn about who we are. And we're going to learn whether or not our fears are real. And we're going to learn how much courage we actually have. I didn't have a long-term plan. I didn't expect to be where we are today. My mindset was I have to find a way to survive to the end of the week, to the end of the month, and then I got to do the same thing. And it was, what are the things that I'm afraid of that I know I must face in order to get through this stage to the next stage? That was the season. That was one of the hardest seasons I've ever had because I had no results. Nobody really cared about what we were doing. I was running out of money. And transparently, I didn't have a ton of belief that we were going to make it to where we are today anyway.
Kind of like trying to thrive in this survival mode and trying to move on from the survival mode into something more productive for you.
Yes, 100%.
But at the same time, I just want to point out, yes, those moments are devastating. They're very tough to push through. But comparing it with, going to the gym and putting all of those plates on the bench press, and you see that this is the trying for a personal record, and you're not sure if you're going to pull through,
Yeah.
but eventually you make this last rep and you stand up and thinking, this wasn't supposed to happen in my brain, but at the end it happened, and now, okay, I can try for something else. I can, conquer another fear that I already have.
Yes.
Can put more weight on the squat rack, for example, this time. So yes, those moments are very, very troublesome and ugly for sure. Not very romantic to look at, but when you think about them in retrospect, they're the most precious ones that build us, and that's why I want to focus more on those moments in this episode and in this podcast as a whole. So thanks for sharing those.
Of course, my friend.
Definitely worth it. And now moving on from the challenges, those challenges obviously transform us, but there's usually somebody who helps us along the way. Sometimes a person, and sometimes somebody close to us. Sometimes it's a fictional figure that we put on as our idol. Sometimes it's even some kind of a course that you've taken and it made you realize, all right, I can push through this as well. Can you tell me, like, what was the main lesson that your mentor and your current business partner taught you?
Yeah, the biggest one was big things start small. I know right now it doesn't seem like any of this matters and nobody cares, but if we do this every day for the next 10 years, there's no possible way we're not very successful. He said, we just got to keep going. It's going to suck. And from day to day, we're not going to see any results. And honestly, a lot of the time, it's probably going to feel like we're losing. But when it feels like we're losing, we're actually winning. And that's been the motto for the last 6 years, 7 years now almost, is so every time we meet pretty much every day, we talk to each other every day. Yeah. And every single day that we meet, he says 2 things. He says another nail in the structure. So if we do 3 podcast episodes, he'll say 3 nails in the structure, strong nails in the structure. And he'll say, keep doing the hard things no one wants to do. That's the thing he says at the end of every single meeting, every single call we have. And that has kind of become our phrase of, look, you might not want to do it, but if you do want the result, if you have a belief in the fact that you can accomplish the result and you do believe you know what it will take to do it, that's up to you. That's a choice of whether or not you want to do it. And that's what we've committed to. So yeah, he's helped me set really good expectations of what this is all going to look like. And he's always been there to answer any questions about lack of awareness or lack of understanding around something. But big things start small. and keep doing the hard things no one wants to do. Those are the two big ones.
Love those. Like, I definitely need to meet with him as well. But I just resonate with this idea of putting the work every day. Like the quote that is stuck in my head might sound cheesy, but no, you don't expect one day to. I might butcher it a little bit, but you don't expect one day to wake up and see a wall in front of you. You lay the brick, one brick every day,
Yeah.
and eventually you look up, you see a wall. Love this kind of mentality. It also relates to the gym experiences. Obviously, you don't see it overnight, but once you put the right amount of work, definitely see the results eventually.
Yes.
So currently you mentioned that you're running this podcast, you have turned it into a successful business, and one way or another, and your partner fit into the role of a mentor to your clients and to the listeners that tune into your podcast.
Mm.
What exactly is the main lesson, the main plan that you want to give away to your current listeners or to your audience?
Yeah, it's always this. It's very much what we're talking about here today is we're never going to tell you that growth is easy. We're never going to tell you that evolution and self-awareness and all of that stuff is easy. We talk about a lot of stuff that's not very sexy, but it's very necessary. So it's always my goal is to share my stories, my lessons, my experiences with the hope that you'll take that and say, oh, okay, this is how it went for Kev. Maybe it'll go differently for me. Maybe it'll go the same for me. Maybe it'll happen quicker. Maybe it'll take longer. I don't know. It's always my goal to give as much of the truth as possible. Really, this journey has been nothing short of brutal. It's taken us 7 years to get to where we are. It's been challenging. I've lost friends. I've spent less time with family. It's been a genuine challenge. So it's always my goal to give the truth so people can set realistic expectations, take an aligned approach, and have the right time perspective so they can actually stick with it long enough to succeed.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but what the main message you want to portray is like, tell your truth, be as authentic as possible. This is the way towards, your end goals.
Yeah, in a world that kind of runs on deceit and it runs on not lies, but people tend to stretch the truth. You can get ahead if you just tell the truth for a long enough period of time. It's a long game. It's just a long game versus a short game. So yeah, our thing is always play the long game. 10 years from today, your life will look drastically different. And if you are focused on making it an intentional difference, I would bet on you for sure.
Love the fact that you're bringing this up. Probably something for the younger audience, because what I want to say is like, again, you mentioned it, kind of we live in a life in a world where things get twisted. We get a little bit manipulative with the things that we say. We might not even realize it, but when we publish pictures on Instagram, Facebook, whatever, we always put the best pictures, right? And we know that not everybody has only great moments. And for me, I realized probably 2-3 years ago that definitely being the most authentic version of yourself, being as truthful as possible, is the way that you push forward. Yes, that doesn't mean that you won't make any mistakes. That doesn't mean that you will not offend anybody. But if you try not to offend and try not to harm the rest while you're living, in the most truthful way, sooner or later you will get to your goals. And at the end of the day, when you go to bed, you'll feel much more peaceful than if you did otherwise.
Yes.
I'm not. Are you a hip hop fan for?
Of course, big fan. Yeah, big hip hop fan.
I'm sure you realize that the most authentic rappers, they are the ones that tell the story of their lives, not the ones that come up with some random rhymes that take from here and there, but the ones who manage to, give away their story, or while it rhymes under a very good beat, but at the same time, they're as authentic as they could be.
Yes, I agree. J. Cole is one of my favorite artists. So yes.
Great, nice to bring this up. And I was actually the mention that the quote that I butchered about the wall, I learned it from Nipsey Hussle, and this is one of my examples for one of the most authentic people that try to do it. So yeah, authenticity definitely can take you, as you mentioned, we do this for the long term, so definitely you need it in order to grow further.
You do.
Now, moving on just to again, I want to reflect on the podcast a little bit and how powerful you mentioned that you always tell different stories when you talk to the other people. What kind of stories resonate the most with your audience? Or is there something, for example, in the way that you tell your stories that make them more powerful?
I think two thoughts. One, relatable stories. So there's either inclusive stories or exclusive stories. Inclusive stories are, I'm sure you've experienced this. Exclusive stories are, you may never have experienced this, but maybe you want to. So I think inclusive makes people feel understood, seen, heard. I think exclusive makes people say, oh, interesting. Maybe they're further along than I thought. That's one thought that I have. The other one is, I think just going back to the authenticity. I may not always tell the story in the best way, and I might leave stuff out, and I might have to go back in and say, oh, I forgot this, but I'm just trying to tell the story the way I remember it, not the way it's going to sound best, or not the thing that's going to give me the most credibility. I like telling stories that show transformation. And I think that's what we're kind of all after. If you turn on a movie and in the very beginning, the person is extremely wealthy, in the very middle, they're even wealthier, and at the end, they're even wealthier than they were in the beginning, that's not a real good story. There's no transformation, right? There's no transformation. But if the beginning, they're very broke, and then they get broker, and they're actually brokest at the end, that's not a really good story of transformation either. So figuring out, how do you tell a story that shows growth, it shows transformation, and it shows evolution? I think that's usually what resonates the most with our audience. Yeah.
Great that you are bringing this up, Kevin, because it's already, we tackled it briefly on another episode, but I agree currently, especially on the movie side of it, Hollywood movies, they try to kind of butcher the stories nowadays, as you mentioned. In the beginning of the story, they are already wealthy. At the end of the story, they are the wealthiest, and it's kind of, okay, what happened in this movie? Why did I waste 2 hours of my time? Like, where was the transformation?
Right.
So yeah, I appreciate that you brought this up, and kind of one by one, I want to close this episode out, and I want to connect it again with the story that you just mentioned. Now, transformational stories are the best ones. They are the ones that motivate us. They are the ones that make us believe that, all right, he was an ordinary person first, but at the end, he managed to become the king of the village. So if he can do it, if he has a specific plan, then I can do it as well. My question at this point is there a specific story, whether it's fictional, non-fictional, in your personal life or not, that you always run to when you need some kind of inspiration?
It's a movie. It's a movie with Will Smith. It's called The Pursuit of Happiness. That's one of the, you want to talk about transformation, that I can't watch that movie without crying. It's one of the best representation of one of the best representations of how much humans can change and evolve. So that is a big one for me. I haven't watched it in a while because I didn't want to bawl my eyes out, but I'm sure I'll have to watch it before the year is over for sure. That's one that inspires me a ton. Great.
Love this movie as well. And yeah, I'm also a fan of those biopics. I know that this one is actually based, to some extent on a true story. And just randomly, when you mentioned Pursuit of Happiness, the next movie that popped into my head was The Founder, the movie that follows the story of McDonald's. Yeah, probably one of my favorite ones, but love the fact that you have shared this one with me and our audience. One by one, the questions I had in mind are running out, and I'm sure there are a lot of more nuggets and lessons that I can extract from you if we continue the conversation. But obviously, you have other things to do as well. But before I let you go, is there something else that you want to mention that I didn't manage to ask you, something that you want to leave our audience with?
I would say, just on the theme of stories and movies and books and storytelling, at the end of the day, you are the author and you are the editor, and you can rewrite chapters and you can write more chapters and you can white out stuff and erase stuff. But don't forget that you have the pen or the pencil in your hand. I think a lot of us feel like we've given the pen or pencil and somebody else has been the author of our story, the editor of our story. At the end of the day, your story is your story, and you have the power to change it as needed.
Great, love it. And so if I can take a couple of things from this episode, definitely put the truthfulness first, be as authentic as possible. Don't underestimate the fact when you put, your daily work and daily effort into whatever you want to achieve. Nothing happens overnight. Nothing good happens overnight. If you achieve it quickly, then you start losing, this sensation out of it.
Mm.
And the third thing probably is you are the author of your story. Take control of the things that you're doing on a daily basis and fix the environment around you a little bit. Make sure that you're in the right environment.
Love it. I love it.
Great, Kevin. Thanks for joining this conversation. Thanks for being on this podcast. I love the story that you have shared, and I would love to continue the conversation off camera as well.
Thank you for having me, my friend. I appreciate you.